I mean, it's not unrealistic when a dude just gets shot in a war film or when one character just fights better than the other. Because that's how real violence works. The bullets don't care if you're only in the first act of your story or if some narrative threads haven't been resolved yet. They're not going to whiz past you until hitting you would maximize the emotional weight of the situation. And that's why virtually no violent stories try to mimic the actual qualities of violence. Because as fascinating as it would be to decide who lives and who dies via a dice roll, your narrative would lose its structure pretty quickly. This won't make much sense to people who haven't seen or read Game of Thrones, but imagine if Robb Stark just died in one of his many battles like George R.R. Martin originally planned. Just like took a stray arrow to the face or got overwhelmed by the opposing force and stabbed, like so many people did in medieval times. The audience would accept it, I think, because that's how war is. And the ensuing drama within the narrative would be gut-wrenching, I'm sure, but that's not the type of world Martin chose to create. Robb still dies, but it's because of his choices and the choices of other characters, all behaving according to their respective traits. Like going into GOT Season 3, Episode 9, we know that Robb was raised on honor and principles and that he's just left the nest. And even if he did know who his true enemies were, he wouldn't expect them to break a sacred custom in order to win. I mean, it barely even feels like a writing choice to whack him. The character traits that led to this were planted at the start, and they inevitably brought us to this shocking moment of narrative combustion. It's infinitely more satisfying than Robb dying in battle. Would that be unrealistic? No, but there's only so much drama you can wring out of it's war, people die. And if that wasn't enough, Martin goes out of his way to make sure fights don't end like they do in real life. Given Ned and Jaime's established traits, their duel in Season 1 was always going to happen. They're in the same place at the same time. They have gratuitous beef. As a writer, Martin couldn't escape the inevitability of this fight where one character would logically kill the other. So what does he do? He makes up some random bullshit to stop the fight. I mean, who is this guy? Why would he do that? In the books, it was a horse accident. But either way, Martin is stepping in and saying, no, that's not how people die in this story. I'm not just going to kill a character because the other guy had a good move. If I kill a character, it's going to be for character-driven reasons. So that brings me to example number 2, the Suicide Squad. I enjoyed it for the most part, but I want to talk about one scene that really sticks out to me as a missed opportunity. Dare I say even a major flaw. So this character is named Rick Flag. He is a longtime military dude who puts his life on the line every day to support America's interests. But in the third act of the film, Rick uncovers a dark secret about the US government. He feels betrayed and decides to leak that secret to the US media. But before he can, John Cena's character, Peacemaker, points a gun at Rick's chest. And Peacemaker was established earlier as a by any means American loyalist type. He reveals that the government tasked him with keeping the information secret, and based on his characterizations and Rick's, we understand the situation to be plausible. So, this is it. Peacemaker has this choice to make. It's kill Rick or don't kill Rick. And this choice will have massive consequences going forward. So, what happens? Oh, the ceiling collapses on them. So, you must be thinking this is to facilitate Rick's survival, or at least I was thinking that. Writer-director James Gunn knew there was no way out for Rick, so he solved the problem with some random bullshit happening. And you'd be wrong, because immediately after the ceiling falls, Rick and Peacemaker get up and start fighting, and it's very entertaining. And then Peacemaker kills Rick with a shard of debris. Why? Because he fought better. He had a good move. This plot beat on paper is exactly the same as it would have been if the ceiling hadn't fallen. But no, we just had to do this cool fight scene, even if it liquefied any sense of character agency. Fights to the death aren't real drama. You're only on the edge of your seat because the real drama happened earlier and now you're attached to the characters. Now, sometimes what happens is the action scene will play out and it will be entertaining, but the resolution of the fight will be grounded in a character choice. Which is fine. Like, Oberyn and the Mountain have their fight, but Oberyn chooses to antagonize Tywin and taunt the Mountain instead of killing him, and the Mountain takes advantage of this. Now, if I were James Gunn, I would have just had Peacemaker execute Flag before the ceiling fell because he had the jump on him and there was a clear choice to be made. But if the studio forced me to have a fight scene, I would lead the fight to a place where one of the two characters has to choose between his mission or his life, and I would let that choice play out. And yeah, this movie masquerades as an anyone can die movie, but that's only for the first act. After that opening battle where Jai Courtney gets helicoptered, our main characters are locked in and those bullets, knives, tentacles, whatever, they all miss until the right time. And to me, you can't structure a script with conventional drama, but also pick and choose which characters die because of random chaos and when. I would pay to see a version of this script where James Gunn literally decided each character's fate in each battle with a coin flip, and he forced himself to build the story around that. But instead, this property and most others don't implement random chaos until it suits their pre-planned emotional roadmap. Like, pick a lane, you know? The bad guys can't just miss until you feel a particular character has reached a good stopping point. And I say the flag death scene is irritating as opposed to implausible or ridiculous because I can't really take points off for it. Nothing is contrived, nobody is acting out of character. I can't tear it apart on any logical level. And if you tell me this wasn't an issue for you, then, you know, that's fine. I can't refute that. You're not wrong. And maybe it would have been a little off-putting if Rick just got... That's really not the way this genre works, but personally, I think it is so cheap to build a character with choices and then kill that character because, whoopsie, the other guy just did better fight moves. Now, I can already see an objection coming, which is, what about Rocky and other sports movies? Aren't those built around fight scenes? And yeah, they are, but they're established variables that inform the outcome of the fight. Like Rocky has to train to become the champion. When he stops training, he loses his edge. Oh, look, another guy is training while Rocky slacks off. You know, I wonder what'll happen. There's a clear emphasis put on the mental component as well. In sports movies, the good guys have to clear mental and emotional hurdles if they want to succeed. Those hurdles are well defined and they're often laid out at the beginning of the film. In Remember the Titans, for example, the characters overcoming their biases is explicitly tied to their success as a team. A clear line of cause and effect is established. Failing to unify means failing to perform. Another argument against this might be the fact that fighting isn't just random chaos, it's a skill that involves rapid-fire decision-making. To which I would say, yes. However, those decisions rarely have anything to do with the character. Like, unless a specific fighting technique was tied to a character's arc and meant more in the grand scheme of the story, it's not a worthy device with which to end another character's arc, or to further the plot really in any way. This is a nothing beat. Narratively speaking, it is off the rails. Both characters are at the mercy of the writer, when they should have been at the mercy of causality and their own arcs, which are coming to an end. James Gunn could have written, Rick catches the blade and stabs Peacemaker. Or he could have written, it misses and goes into his shoulder. And I'd be saying the exact same thing right now, because you're wringing these massive narrative payoffs out of nothing. Nothing but your desire to kill one character or another. A sentiment I hear a lot is that good films make you care about the characters before putting them in harm's way. And now the action means something because you want them to win. And that's true, but that's not the whole truth. Great rewatchable action films don't just leave the drama at the door as soon as the action starts. They let the drama inform the action. If I were in the theater watching The Return of the King in 2004 and some sweaty dude next to me leaned over and said, they win, I wouldn't throw my hands up in the air and leave. The question of who would win was never the reason I cared, because the action in that film wasn't just a break from the drama, it was the drama. Heavily stylized, yes, but ultimately built on a series of character payoffs that were satisfying, both independently and collectively. That's what kept audiences coming back. That's how it broke the stereotype of so-called action movies failing at the Oscars. And on the subject of action films at the Oscars, let's talk about Black Panther. You could argue that what T'Challa learns and accepts gives him the tools to win the rematch against Killmonger, but you'd be writing the film for Ryan Coogler. In reality, the script does nothing to connect T'Challa's inner conflict to his fighting ability. They are two completely separate things. Why did he lose the first fight? He didn't fight well. Why did he win the second fight?
Hell of a move.
And for my final example, I would like to point out what I believe to be the only flaw in The Godfather. Calm down. So around halfway through the first film, Don Vito Corleone is gunned down in the street by would-be assassins from a rival family. And despite being shot several times in the torso, he survives. It's not an impossibility that breaks the story, but it does make me wonder why. Like, why didn't those bullets hit his heart or his brain? There's so many ways writer Mario Puzo could have made this not a contrivance. To name a few, Vito, being a veteran gangster, could have anticipated the attack and worn protective clothing. The assassins could have intentionally flubbed it out of respect or fear or because they were paid off. The bullet could have hit a cross on his neck, anything. But what we get is a coin flip. He simply lives because that's what has to happen for the story to continue. It didn't take me out of the movie the first time or the second time, and The Godfather is still one of the best films ever made, but this is a moment of weakness in the script. When trained assassins are sent to kill a man, and a point is made of how little protection that man has, and the assassins aren't impeded by anyone or anything, he should die. I'm sorry, yes, fight me. I understand that a guy like Vito could have survived in that situation, but are you really going to tell me that one of the biggest plot beats in the story hinges on, oh yeah, I guess it's possible, like nothing else? If Vito had died, the rest of the film would have played out in a completely different way. Michael's arc hinges on this, and you're just gonna let his fate be a matter of random chance? You can throw all the tomatoes you want, but I think this is a fumble. I think this is a massive fumble. In real life, violence is often so random and chaotic, which is why I think a lot of writers think they can get away with making it so in their stories. But I'd like to draw your attention to the Aaron Sorkin quote that quite literally changed my understanding of writing.
The properties of people and the properties of character have almost nothing to do with each other. They really don't. I know it seems like they do because we look alike, characters and people. But people don't speak in dialogue. Their lives don't unfold in a series of scenes that form a narrative arc. The rules of drama are really very much separate from what we know, like I said, the properties of life.
To extrapolate, I think Sorkin is saying art shouldn't necessarily imitate life. Many feel that news outlets warp real events to suit a pre-planned narrative, and it's not hard to see a connection between that and the myths and legends of history. Things that may have started in our chaotic, complicated world, but have since been reshaped to accommodate cultural understandings. At the risk of sounding pretentious, I'd say narrative makes more sense to us than the real world. People can have spontaneous lapses in judgment. People can get hit by stray bullets. People can die of aneurysms for no reason at all, but not characters. At least not the ones we agree are good. So I originally wrapped this video with a single sentence about bridging the gap between action and character, but I think this jumbled mess of ideas could be summarized a bit better. All the negative examples I gave share a common through line, which is that they hinge on the audience's understanding of plausibility to work. And I'm not saying there's no room for symbolic twists of fate in writing. I am more so arguing that if a story intends to sustain itself beyond the anecdotal, i.e. a saga, a series, a world-building venture, it has to have rules. I'm working on an in-depth critique of The Walking Dead because I think it's a perfect example of how to fail at this. I've heard people attribute The Walking Dead's fall off to a lot of things. Filler content, circular plots, hard-to-believe character arcs, but I don't think anyone's hit the nail on the head quite yet. The biggest problem with The Walking Dead is that its action is too realistic. And I don't mean it's too graphic or too lifelike in any aesthetic sense. I mean, when a group of characters is attacked, the writers sometimes just kill one off at random. The fan base, of which I consider myself a part for some time, knows this, and they've developed a who's gonna die culture that fuels their anticipation of the next episode. The show and its supplementary content lean into this, and they make you wonder who the writers are gonna choose to kill off next. At the end of Season 6, they had Negan kill a main character off screen, and they made fans wait until the beginning of Season 7 to find out who it was. And it wasn't obvious, like a line of causality was deliberately avoided. We had no idea what was going to happen, and we definitely should have. I can't think of a greater way to disrespect the character than to kill them or spare them from death for a reason that has nothing to do with their character. The people who still defend the scene because they like the shock value should wait against the Red Wedding. Shock value and causality are not mutually exclusive, you just have to be a good enough writer to stay ahead of your audience. The Red Wedding is the work of a brilliant pickpocket who's so dynamic and entertaining that we don't notice what he's doing with his other hand until it's too late, and he's stolen our watch, and we're taken aback by how simple it was and how it all makes sense in retrospect. The Season 7 premiere of The Walking Dead is what happens when the pickpocket realizes it's easier to just hold you at gunpoint and take the watch, but instead of leaving you with a begrudging admiration for him, he just makes you feel bitter. What he did took no level of skill, and you couldn't have seen it coming if you tried. That, my friends, is why I don't like realistic, unpredictable violence in media, because that unpredictability is just a backdoor for the writer to personally enter the story and play God, taking agency away from characters at moments when their choices should be front and center. And while realistic violence might keep viewers on the edges of their seats in the moment, its ultimate consequences are a fundamental breakdown of stakes within the narrative and an othering of said viewers when they realize that their intellectual investments do not have intellectual returns.